Well, the 2019 election came with its lessons, and some candidates from that process have taken these on board and are refocusing their energies to vie for office again. As INEC, that's Nigeria's independent electoral umpire, cut political parties to manageable numbers after the last general election, the prominent remained, and some of the third forces also stayed in the reckoning. To cause an upset against the more popular and established parties, alliances are being formed by the third force, one of which is between the African Action Congress, the AAC, and the People's Redemption Party, the PRP. Can such alliances change the Nigerian polity? How popular are these parties? Will the AAC and the PRP cause an upset? What are their plans for Nigeria and Nigerians? And who is their presidential candidate? These questions and a lot more will be answered today at the HQ. Joining me to unpack it all is Omoyele Sowore, the presidential candidate of the African Action Congress. Good to see you, and thanks again for your time.
Thank you for bringing me here.
Quite a number of Nigerians joined the fray in 2019, and well, you're still standing tall and strong.
Yes.
Perhaps let's start from that. Your lessons of 2019, and how did you manage to stay afloat till this moment, and you're running?
Well, 2019 was a different game for us. It was my first time contesting, and we had quite a number of contestants. Over 79, I guess, were the number of presidential
79
candidates in that election. I wouldn't say that all of them carried it to the finish line, but quite a number of us. But what was different with regards to myself was that I never stopped campaigning. But it was just like it was a different kind of campaigning. After that selection, or if you want to call it their own type of election, we went to start digging into real socio-political issues and the question of leadership. And we started this Revolution Now movement, which got me arrested and detained for 5 months. And after that, I was restricted to Nigeria up until around July or so. So it was to the Nigerian people and to our political movement. There was no moment that we stopped, dealing with the socio-political issues. We're dealing with economic issues. We're dealing with police brutality issues, human rights. And we were first to kickstart NSAS in Abuja at the police headquarters. Regardless of what anybody tells you, I was actually the first to tweet about NSAS, and I did most of the mobilization on the ground of some of the celebrities that took part in NSAS, talking to them both privately and publicly on Twitter. So I think that gave us an edge over others in terms of recognition, trust, and political engagement in ways that nobody else did from the 2019 class. So in 2019, probably I'm one of the only candidate apart from Atiku Abubakar, and maybe Peter Obi, because he was his deputy in 2019, who prominently participated in 2019, who is still around. In fact, I was reading today that Kingsley Moghalu sent a tweet out today that he's no longer getting involved in politics. So he has retired from politics, starting from today. So it shows to you that the uniqueness of our political engagement and strategy and engagement with power was different from those of others. I think so many people came thinking it was an easy game, or they could just put their name out there and get some recognition.
So it's not a tea party?
For us, it's not, because fundamentally, we want to change society in a way that has never been done before in Nigeria's political history. Of course, particularly in the last 20 years.
Sure. How easy has that been? Because if we go through time and look at what you did back in school, I'm not talking about your days in college, at the university, and what you're going through at the moment, you've been constant. And at what point do you think it was necessary for you to, join activism to politics?
Well, it was that for me, activism is not different from politics because what is the goal of an activist? It's to change society, to make sure that leaders are put on their toes and that citizens who believe in democracy also enjoy the benefits of democracy and to constantly be active on social, political, economic, and cultural issues. That's what activists do. A politician supposedly is supposed to also believe in, uh, progress for his country, his citizens, in a political way, political in ways that you can call partisan ways, because they join political parties or form political parties, and they also want to achieve the same objective, almost as that of an activist. If you want to understand it better, maybe you look at South Africa, for instance. The ANC had been in existence as a political party as far back as I think 1928 or thereabout, and their goal was to liberate South Africa from white minority rule, and it went through the whole gamut of fighting, agitating, even engaging in armed struggle until eventually in 1994 they got to that goal. So it's nothing different. And who was their first president, black president? A political activist, Nelson Mandela.
So, in other words, I'm looking at the trajectory and the possibility of also Nigeria getting into that, history book of having an activist ultimately leading the country, and you think you can be that person?
Yes, that's the ultimate goal. But I don't think what is more important is the generic description of my person. I think it's more about the very genuine description of my passion, my vision, and my interest in making this country work. And this is something I had started doing when I was younger. And when I started at the University of Lagos, I didn't know what activism was, on a global scale. I was a student who was interested in progress for the country, ensuring that students have the best welfare systems on campus. In fact, I started my political journey on campus as a welfare secretary of a hostel, Enrica Hall at the University of Lagos. So I wasn't, I was a localized student activist who was also going to classes, attending classes like every other person. But my full-time job was being a student, and I then moonlighted as a welfareist for students. And we'll hang out, watch TV, make sure that the mosquito nets are working perfectly. When they requested for fans in their rooms, and the school authority, told us that their rooms were too small for ceiling fans, we went and did the measurement and took it to them the next day. When we got there, in their warehouse, they had fans that we purchased for the hall that's been there for over 2 years, and we got them, fixed them, and within a short time, everybody had a ceiling fan in their room. Had I stayed longer, it would have been air conditioning by now. But I don't even think the universities have electricity anymore.
Sowore, what truly comes to mind listening to someone like you is about, the passion and to think that it's a thankless job. You can imagine being in school. So it's not a case of saying someone, you're actually working towards an aim, perhaps to be so elected to a position where you get money, but you get excited, you get joy and some kind of relief from seeing that people are stabilized, that people are happy and comfortable. Is that the same with politicking?
Oh, yes. But you see, the reason why people ask the question you asked earlier, which is, what does an activist want in a political system like ours, is that people have been made and conditioned to see politics in Nigeria as, the pastime of the greedy. So if you tell someone, for instance, a lie, or they give you a call and you don't call back, and they know that you'll be reading their messages and you're not responding, the first thing they call you is a politician. Oh, you're a politician, because it is something that they see as people who are deceptive. people who don't tell the truth. So it's the reason why they look at people like me who are political actors and say, do you want to go stain your records or your reputation? Why are you doing politics? Because they've been conditioned to believe that politics or politicking is for dregs of society, people who are dishonest, people who come to steal and enrich themselves and empower their cronies and families. But we're trying to say, no, that shouldn't be the case. Politics should be about service. It's just the entry point on the partisan level for someone who believes in public service and who want to do it by getting elected, as opposed to getting appointed or forcing themselves on people through a military coup d'etat, for instance. So that's what I was. When I became a student, an elected hall official, hostel official, I wasn't even qualified to be elected because it was my second year in the university. I mean, second semester in the university, and no first year students ordinarily were allowed to run for that office. So we ran up to the student affairs office and said, "Look, second semester, what's the big deal about welfare office? Can we get a waiver?" It was granted, and I won. And ever since then, I don't know how it operates now. Every second semester student could get elected into that position. So I wasn't doing it knowing that I would even qualify. And it's always been my life commitment to just offer myself for service, make people happy, and everybody can go to sleep and I can go to sleep as well.
And that lifetime, offer which you've given to the people has caused you some kind of pain. Well, more a bit of personal things. I understand that for almost 5 years, you haven't actually set eyes on your children.
Yes, about 4 years now.
About 4 years.
Yes. I was joking around with a friend 2 days ago that I left my kids as kids. Maybe by the time I get back to them, they'll become full adults. Because my daughter, I left her when she was 12. Now she's 15. My son is 13 years old, thereabout. And so, and I see their pictures all the time. They've grown. My son is probably as tall as I am now. When I left him, it was at the height of my chest. My daughter is taller than I am. My son traveled for the first time to Spain to play soccer this year on his own. So I didn't get on the plane until I was maybe around 24, 25 years old. And I was from Lagos to Yola. And I couldn't even manage it, because I have never been inside an
I'm sure
airplane
they
before.
probably understand the kind of
So what
transport.
I'm saying is that these things happen. But, who am I complaining when somebody spent 27 years in prison? And by the time he got back home, he didn't know anybody, probably including his wife anymore. But I hope that doesn't happen to me.
Now let's speak of hope. Using the word, lifting it off you. What form of hope does the AAC have in our politics, looking at Nigeria? For you to still be in politics after the 2019 election means you are an optimist of a better Nigeria.
Well, my kind of optimism is different. It's part optimism, part pessimism. I'm a pessimist for believing in governmental processes, and this I expect the worst and hope for the best. I'm an optimist for the future, and that whatever is done right now, even if we don't get to be in charge directly, that a new generation I emerge or would emerge that will not accept this kind of conditions of existence, and that we would have inspired them, or that whatever little contribution we can give, any kind of sacrifice that we can make now, that would even make people in position of power think twice sometimes when they take decisions or they make policies. They are not bad for me, and that makes me optimistic. The fact that we are seeing younger generations of persons who are getting radicalized as well, promising that this system will catch hell one day if it continues this way, is for me an optimistic engagement. So I just don't know and I don't want to make a prediction that we're going to get out of this as quickly as we wish.
Well, speaking of engagement, you've been going around, and once we thought that without money, you can get into politics. And we see the crowd every time the AAC Sowore is out there. And perhaps what kind of change is this bringing to Nigeria's politics, knowing full that we understand you have a pool of volunteers, young Nigerians across the divide, all volunteering to ensuring that your aspiration comes to fruition?
It's the reason, we're optimistic. I'm optimistic sometimes. So just know that. So the way to break it down is that there are about 16 or 17 presidential candidates. There used to be 18, but I had the only female step down for someone else. I don't know who. But when you talk about the front lines of visibility, you find us everywhere. You find the AC, you find my person there. I get invited everywhere. I have volunteers, not only in Nigeria, but in the diaspora. And we've done like little fundraisings here and there that would amount to nothing compared to what our competitors have access to or they're spending. I heard of a candidate who got 3.6 billion naira, got private jets donated, helicopters donated to him, and they're having a hard time competing with us. And I don't think I have raised up to 20, between 30, 20 to 20, 30 million naira since we started. But everything is based on volunteerism. Everything is based on support. So people are out there using their own resources, their time, their energy to campaign for us. They're reaching out, printing posters, printing T-shirts, hats, and they're taking the message from us to every nook and cranny of the country. They are volunteering as we speak to become party agents on election day. They are going to schools, they are going to churches, mosques, because we don't want our elections, our participation in politics to be defined by religion or ethnicity. But people are doing whatever they can in every nook and cranny of the country to promote the idea, the candidacy, the policies, and the ideology of AAC. And everywhere we turn up, the ovation has been very encouraging. So yet, I don't have a private jet, and I don't even fly business class on a commercial plane. I sit in the middle at the back as the seats might be available. I'm not saying those things matter, but yeah, we've been everywhere and we've touched every nook and cranny of this country. Courtesy of also people like you who continue to give us the desired publicity that we need, because it's been also a tough job for us to get on every media platform out there, because they are very highly controlled by the money bags in this country. So we must say that. We appreciate the kind of publicity we're getting, the unbiased kind of engagements and opportunities we've had with stations like yours. But we've done very well. We've done very well.
I don't mean to cut you, but it's a shame that, to think that you're a journalist. So now we're talking about our profession.
Yeah.
For a bit, sometimes people forget that Sowore is a journalist.
Well, they see me as an outlier in the journalism profession.
So we'll come back to talking a bit of your journalism, because I recall some of those big, big hits, big investigative journalism, you've been able to uncover. But again, quite frankly, you've raised a very important aspect, which is about, giving an equal platform to everyone to speak, especially in an election year like this.
Absolutely.
Now, let's take a moment. When we come back, we'll talk about the AAC's agenda, and I also want to take you back in time. I'm quite sure you'll be amazed. We'll go back in time to bring back some of those classic stories which you personally did investigate it, and it looks as if, history has just vindicated you. That's when we come back here on Politics HQ. Join us again. Well, if you just joined us, you're watching Politics HQ here on News Center Television, broadcasting to 54 African countries and beyond. And we're looking at Nigeria's journey to the next election. And one of the few politicians who were in the last election is still very much strong. Omoyele Sowore, who is the presidential candidate of the African Action Congress. Once again, thanks for your time.
But
before we dig in deep into the aspiration or the manifesto of your party, let's quickly take you back to history. And this is almost a decade ago when you spoke about some form of corruption and money laundering against the former Director General of the Labour Party, Dr. Okukwe.
Dr. Doyo Okukwe forgot that when the military was ravaging the land, we were student leaders who were fighting on the ground. When the likes of Dr. Doyo Okukwe were all around doing deals, with the military leaders and selling away Nigeria, I reported, and that's part of the problem. I reported on Doyo Okukwe himself, Dr. Doyo Okukwe, involved in corruption.
The guy that is talking to you is a huge joke. He's a liar. A man without any reputation. People who collect money and just say anything, destroy people. You see him talking about corruption about me. There's never been charges of corruption against
you
anywhere.
Were detained for corruption by the EFCC.
This is what they do. They just,
That was almost a decade ago.
That was 2013. I was featured on Al Jazeera with The Stream, and he was representing President Goodluck Jonathan at that point as the spokesperson. So I was paired with him, and he was sounding all sanctimonious. In fact, this conversation was about Boko Haram when it was starting. It started around 2019, but at this point, it had become a major, major problem. So, and I wanted the world to see who was representing Nigeria. And at that point, he had been accused of corruption, money laundering. But 9 years later, he was convicted. Some 4 days ago, of money laundering. And that is also part of the reason why I decided that writing, investigating corruption is not enough to change society. Because these guys have become used to even being exposed. They don't care anymore. You saw him laughing, conveniently, laughing off the allegations on international TV. But look at how long it took for him to get convicted. 9 years later, and within that period, by the way, he'd been accused again in 2016 or 2017 of corruption. So had we taken him out in 2013, he would not have had access to another 720 million naira that he was accused. In fact, it was in that case that he's convicted here. But the sad part was that he was merely asked to pay back 13 million naira. Somebody who stole 720 million naira is asked to pay back 13 million naira. What fraction of percentage of how much he stole is that? That's not justice as far as I'm concerned. But it's part of the motivation that brought people like me to say, look, we're going to go into the political system, clean it up, and motivate and create and mobilize new sets of conscious young people with conscience.
So the fight against corruption for the AAC, speak to us on that, because the present administration, President Buhari, actually wrote on the back of fighting corruption, and he got the vote of the Nigerian people. It means that Nigerians all know for a fact that we must do away, if at all, minimize corruption in our society. Can the AAC do that?
Well, we've always made corruption and the fight against corruption as one of the central focus of AAC. It doesn't matter how people belittle the impact of corruption on society. It does kill society. If you have a budget that is 20-something trillion naira, and people can conveniently steal 11 trillion or 12, you have nothing left. That's the truth. To handle social services, take care of sick people, education, and all the great things you're supposed to do. And you then find out that by way of corruption, every highway in Nigeria that is terrible has been constructed maybe 20 times. Not actually constructed, but constructed on paper, but never constructed on the ground physically. Every high school, university, hospitals that we also have built, and all the great things that this country should have provided for its people, sewage, roof over their head, has been taken by a few. Corruption is a serious problem for Nigeria. But AAC is not just going to be a party that comes to fight corruption. We are planning to ensure that we create a culture that doesn't encourage or allow corruption. That's why we call ourselves a digital party. What you get from that example, as I've described to you, is that somebody stole 720 million naira. After huge amount of investment or money spent on prosecution, he returns back a fraction of it. How about we don't allow a process where you can steal, by using all kinds of technology that are out there now that makes spending transparent, that makes budgeting very transparent, that makes tracking of funds transparent, that makes it impossible. Things like blockchain technology for charlatans to have access to public funds without getting caught on time, by ensuring that the number of staff working for the federal government and they get paid, in currencies that are digital in nature that can be tracked. You see the irony of part of what we talk about. You have a Central Bank of Nigeria that introduced a digital currency, I think 2 years ago. And then they returned to start printing paper money, which is costing an arm and a leg. It shows to you that they don't even know what they're doing. If you are digitalizing, why do you reverse and start falling trees to make paper money? It's the reason why we are in a hurry to come into government to change the way things are done in a revolutionary way and ensure that this country doesn't continue on the trajectory of perdition that has become, that Nigeria has been known for.
Let me take you back so that we can clarify things. That's a phrase or a word that, landed you in trouble when you say in a revolutionary way. Sometimes when you use some words, it looks ambiguous and it frightens some people. So perhaps maybe when you say, politically speaking, you say in a revolutionary way, you might want to explain that so that your followers can better understand.
Well, there's nothing to really explain. Revolution is known as, a very sudden, urgent, and irreversible process of handling a rotten system. So, and I don't think there's anything confusing about it. It frightens and threatens people who are used to their old ways, who are used to corruption, who are used to changing society, violating rights, because that's what they live off of, a rotten system. Those of us who want to clean it, we don't want to hide it. We don't want the language to be ambiguous. They know that when you talk about revolution, they know what you're talking about, and they know the people understand it. And those who may not understand it will check it out. I remember the day I was arrested, there were over 5 million searches on Google for the word revolution by Nigerians. And I'm sure by now they know the meaning. They know what it means. And I went to detention, spent some time there. They kept asking me if that's what I mean, and I said so. And I didn't mince words. It's in my court records. They took me before a judge. And till today, they haven't been able to resolve the issue because they know what I mean and they know where I stand. And they know that this is an irreversible position on our part too. So our party, the AAC, is a revolutionary party.
I think this is a good time to clarify, something that Okupe almost, I think, 9 years ago called you a liar. And some other people also said the same thing then when news broke that you were shot then. Were you actually shot at?
Yes, I was shot at with a federal riot gun. Yeah, and what a federal riot gun is the gun that tear gas at people. But it's also a projectile. If it's shot directly at the person, it will kill you. If it shoots you at close range with that gun, you'll die. If you shoot your head, your chest, you can check out, you can research on it quickly and find out how many people have been killed. But it's not meant to be shot at people directly. It's meant to be shot in the air, and then when it lands, it explodes, and then you have tear gas. But when you shoot it at someone directly, in this case, it shot directly at my thigh. And I fell. I had to go to 2 hospitals. On my way to the second hospital, my thigh had become swollen, and it was twice the size of what it used to be. Before I had to be wheeled to the theater and treated. So anything that's a projectile and that is shot from a barrel can kill somebody. Even if it's a piece of orange. They use rice. They shoot rice at people, you will survive it. So,
which brings us to police brutality, and it's one of the key things. I also understand the AAC talking about justice for all. So you've also been a victim of brutality. How the electorate that you speak to when you go around, by the way, your campaign has taken you quite to almost all the regions in the country. So have you also met some others who are also victims of such brutality?
Oh yeah, we meet them everywhere, because what is so sad about police brutality in Nigeria is that the culture hasn't stopped. Police is still brutal towards people. They still kill people without, in some cases, with just little provocation. In some cases, with
even
no
after NSAS?
After NSAS, they have filled up most of the cells where they used to dump people before NSAS. And during NSAS, of course, they removed quite a number of people. They would release a lot of people from detention, but they're filling them up. Because I have been back I've been brutalized by the police after NSAS. My nose was broken in January of 2021. That was after NSAS. I was shot by a police officer after NSAS. And if that happened to me, someone that's, fairly prominent, what do you think has happened to people in the country? The young people who still get, arrested and tortured because they have hairstyles that the police don't approve of. You still have young people who get shot at because they are driving cars that the police consider too expensive for their status. They call, they allege that they are Yahoo boys. So they torture people. They still extraordinarily and extrajudicially kill people. They haven't stopped. What has stopped is the agitation against police brutality for now. But police brutality itself has not ended. It hasn't stopped at all. And AAC is determined to end it through reforming the police and ensuring that you have a police force that understands the rights of the citizens of Nigeria, and a country that is also able to deliver justice to errant police officers. But we must also understand that they need to be properly trained, they need to be properly paid, they need to live under conditions that are humane and human as well. If you go to a police barrack, as they call them in Nigeria, it's the most animalistic accommodation you can find for any federal government official, and almost one of the same thing with the army. And part of what I want to do is to abolish the barrack system because it's a burden on both the police and society, and to ensure that police officers, as they start working as police officers, that we have a housing scheme for them that enable them own their own homes, so that if anything happens to them or they retire, they have a house they can retire to. These days, if a policeman dies in the course of duty, their families are thrown out almost a week after. They have nowhere to go. But if you have a housing scheme for the police, teachers, the army, and everybody can own their own houses while they're working, and then it solves the problem.
Speak to us then now. Yeah. Speak to us if we can summarize the AACs, because now, speaking of which, now you just spoke to us about that even the police are beneficiary of these.
Absolutely.
So if you can summarize some of the key proposal you have in your campaign, and perhaps let's see if we can do that.
We have this proposal that is popularly known as Spicer Heat. This is the acronym for it, which is like security number one, the power sector reform that will bring electricity to at least a minimum of 28,000 megawatts in the first 4 years, and that will hook over 5 to 10 million homes to electricity. And bringing this by way of renewable energy sources, because we must also consider energy transition in doing this. And we believe that this will bring about jobs, it will bring about progress, and the GDP in Nigeria will grow geometrically, not at the miserable 2.5 rigged percentages that you hear from them all the time in those. And then we have infrastructural development the way we've never planned it before. It's supposed for us to be a serious deal, a new deal kind of a thing that will change. We want to change Nigeria from the raw deal to a new deal era. And we have plans for fighting against corruption, creating an economic system that's equitable and inclusive. We have plans for education. We want to restructure Nigeria, which is the foundational issue we talk about. The Nigerians can sit down and meet and discuss and create a brand new constitution, because you cannot continue in the direction of trying to make a constitution that has no foundation in the first place. It's a military constitution is causing internal concussions within the country. That's why there's a lot of agitations across the country going on. So there's investment in health, housing, in agriculture, in tourism, and the technology. We want to make Nigeria, self-sufficient in food production, self-sustainable as a country, both foundationally and resource exploration and exploitation wise, and be able to become the leader of Africa that they've always called us. Right now, we are called the giant of Africa, but I think we are the most gigantic failure on the continent as of today in terms of expectation of other African nations. And when I travel to other African countries, they say to me, look, they make you feel guilty about the failure of Nigeria. They say, if you guys get it right, we'll be fine. We'll be all right in Kenya. We'll be all right in South Africa. And sometimes some of the anger towards Nigerians outside the country stems from that. You should look at this as like, we're supposed to be going to your country, but you are here, disturbing us. And, they can't understand why we're so rich in resources, but we don't have leaders who have the capacity to tap into the resources and make them create justice, equality, and bring the sweat equity to become something profitable for citizens. Nigerians are just sweating and belonging to Nigeria and uniting with Nigeria, and that translates to unity with hunger, starvation, and deprivation.
Speaking
and want
of
to stop
unity,
that. Yes.
Sowore, are you thinking of a merger?
Not a merger at this time, because it's no longer constitutionally possible. So they've stopped all processes of political party creation mergers, because if you merge at this point, you also have to go back and change your logo, change your original name. But we are entering into a lot of alliances, and one of it is the most prominent one with the PRP, as the People's Redemption Party, which is Nigeria's oldest political party. So, and it's going well. And beyond that, we have an alliance with the oppressed. It's a unity of the oppressed. That's what our party does. That's why we are everywhere. We're standing with the oppressed groups in the country and individuals. We're standing with Shiites. We're standing with IPOB. We're standing with all these groups who feel cheated, who have been oppressed in the country in a way that they don't deserve.
How soon are we likely to get, a sense of what form of alliance you'll be having with the PRP? I think Kola Abiola presently is...
No, wait, so there are two PRPs. There's Legacy PRP, and that's the one that's original. And there's another PRP, which is recognized by the government. And so they are in court. But the Legacy PRP, which is the one that has all the structures that we're working with across the country. And that is going well. We've already made the announcement of the alliance, and the next stages are probably not going to be in the public view for a while, but this alignment of structures at the state, local government, and ward levels. We're looking at which of their candidates that we can support, doing background checks and all that. And we'll be fine with that. One of the great things about the PRP is that it's also based in the northern part of the country. So they have a lot of members in the northwest and northeastern part of the country. And this is where the bloc votes in Nigeria is situated.
The ANC has always spoken about, giving its own opinion on national matters.
Yes.
But it looks as if we missed out on what the ANC thinks of the oil theft in Nigeria.
No, I think we speak every day about issues happening in Nigeria that maybe sometimes people look for an official statement from ANC, but the ANC doesn't operate that way. We speak about issues, we fight about issues, as long as the fights are going on and our positions are known from our officials or several of our groups. Because
so how worried, how disturbed is the ANC with that piece of news?
The interesting thing about oil theft is that the ANC has been talking about it since 2018. Including mentioning names of people who we believed were involved in oil theft. Because oil theft is not some kind of pickpocketing of the oil resources. The people who are stealing oil in the Niger Delta region are not using just gallons. It's not using small containers. They're using badges. So we've spoken about the official collusion and connivance between the Aso Rock officials, the oil ministries,
Aso Rock officials?
yes, there are people in the presidency who are involved directly in this. And the NNPC did say that officially, that this is something that's serious at their level. There was a senior Navy official, his name is Afapa, who spoke openly and mentioned that major international oil companies are involved. He mentioned Shell in particular. And he mentioned specific areas where they deliberately made their pipelines available for theft. And then they bring in badges to take this away. There was also, if you remember, a huge badge that they said they were pursuing and they ran to, I think,
the one that disappeared.
Equatorial Guinea. And you wonder, how is it possible? An average badge travels at 13 knots per hour. 13 knots will be about 25 kilometers, per hour. And you say Navy ship that is probably about 40 or 50 knots can't catch up with it. You know the game, right? If a Navy ship can't catch up, at least you have helicopters who could have done that and stopped the ship or even disabled it. But most importantly, what we know technologically in the shipping industry is that every ship, there's a radar that tracks every ship that enters your country. So it's a matter of looking at your records, see which ships they have allowed in and the ones that are illegally roaming your waters and catching them. It's just like telling me that, a jumbo jet enters into Nigeria's airspace and lands at the airport and then took some cargo. And after he started, leaving, he said, "Oh my goodness, we didn't know how it got here. We didn't know how it took off." But for a jet to land, it must get permission. For it to take off, to even taxi, off the runway, it must get permission. And so they'll say, "This is where you stay." And by the time you're leaving, you must also get permission. So in that regard, we're not afraid to say that leadership in Nigeria has become a joke. And a leadership that connives to steal resources of his own people is not worthy of being called leadership. And we know this because we know people who are involved. Again, we're talking about my job as an investigative journalist. I've revealed so many of these things over the years, including nation-specific people who are involved at the highest levels. And some of them, we revealed some by 2010. And the issues haven't been resolved. And some ships that I reported on as carrying out oil theft are still being investigated, and some of them, some of them have left the country. They bribed Nigerian officials and gotten out. That was why they were trying to burn down a ship recently. And AAC took a position on that. Like the Niger Delta already has its massive environmental problem. How dare you go there and set a ship with over 120,000 barrels of oil? I think it's some ridiculous number of barrels. Huge ship. And it just went there and just set it ablaze. One, it destroys the evidence. Second, it causes another environmental issue. The ship is going to sink into the bottom of the Niger Delta region. It's going to spill all its content and kill fishes and destroy the ecosystem in the area. Leaders here don't think.
Let's close on this. And why should, really now, all of this, people already know you. Perhaps one last one from you. Why should the Nigerian watching now vote the AAC?
Well, the very cheeky way to respond is to say the difference is clear. But that's the truth, is that we have been able to demonstrate over these years, and say to people, look at our record, look at the AAC, look at the formative years of the AAC, how it started and where it is today. Who are the operators of the AAC, apart from the time it was hijacked? And what is their position? What is their position on every facet of life in Nigeria? And who are the operatives? Who are the leaders of AAC? Where are they coming from? We are fighters, and we have always fought against injustice in this country. We fought against corruption. We fought against brutality of citizens. But most importantly, we are the ones who have clear ideological views about how to save this country. And some of ideas that came upstream in 2018, 2019 have been, pushed or plagiarized by those in power, as best solution for solving a lot of Nigeria's problems.
Plagiarize your ideas?
Yes.
You have an example?
I have an example of 2018 when we spoke in Abeokuta that we make June 12th the Democracy Day in the country, and a week later, they invited Abiola's children and they started the whole process. It was our idea to start minimum wage. That was when we started. We were campaigning for a minimum wage of 100,000 naira. The government during that period went and increased the minimum wage to 30,000. It was our original idea, and it still remains our original idea today. Even the Labour Party started now asking that people should be paid 100,000. This is 4 years late because we had moved to 250,000 as a minimum wage or living wage for the Nigerian workers. It was our idea to use digital means.
Is that possible? 250?
It is. It is. If you look at what is the cost of living in 2018 and 2019, the value of the currency of Nigeria, and where we are today, 250 is even not enough for a family of 4. And most Nigerian workers have, big families. That's the nature of it. You have to pay people to be able to survive. 30,000 naira cannot buy you recharge cards for a month.
Omoyele Sowore, presidential candidate, AAC, many thanks for speaking with us. And we do hope that in the new year, just before the elections, you'll be back again
I will be back,
to update Nigerians on your aspirations.
Thank you very much. And as we say, we can't continue like this.
That's true.
Yeah.
We'll take a moment, we'll come back and give you a piece to chew on. Stay with us. Well, let's run down how Africa powers the rest of the world at its expense. Congo has one of the largest deposits of mineral resources for technology in the world, but its people are some of the poorest. They work in cobalt mines for less than $1 a day and starve while their health deteriorates due to excessive exposure to these dangerous substances. Ghana and the Ivory Coast are 2 of the largest producers of cocoa in the world. But how do their farmers fare? They sell cocoa to the world and produce the chocolate drinks and candies the world takes, but are given breadcrumbs in return. Mozambique, Nigeria, and Angola have significant crude oil deposits, but as international oil companies drill, their people face more health challenges and their communities are barely better. The Republic of Benin is the 10th largest cotton producer in the world, and it partly powers the world's textile industry. What you're wearing is probably made of cotton from Benin Republic, but how is Benin faring? Ghana, South Africa, and Burkina Faso sit on large deposits of gold. Botswana, DR Congo, and South Africa sit on diamonds, and everywhere you dig, strikes. In Africa, something good that the world needs. The trees are feeding the world and the grounds are powering what the world enjoys, but Africa has remained at the bottom of the food chain. Leaders think there's greatness waiting on the continent. That's a piece to chew on. I'm Sulaiman. Thanks for watching.